Hi, today I'm going to tell you about the art that I chose, A Stranger in the Village, number 13 by Ligon. Here is the painting of The Stranger in the Village. This is an enamel painting. As you can sort of make out, there's text that has been painted over. And so the text is actually stenciled in with oil and acrylic paint and then layered on with coal dust. In the picture here, you can see the texture that's in the photo. The actual art exhibit stood at a whopping height of 6 feet high by 11 feet wide. As you can see in the middle picture, I tried to get a little bit more detail within the text and show you the actual text within the painting. And then on the third picture, I showed a close-up of the actual text, and you can see the background is a coal dust, and the text in the words is actually risen off of the surface and raised through the coal dust and the paint. So it was a really cool, very dramatic painting to look at. It really stuck out to me. So when I wanted to see what the text was, I ended up getting a lot further into Ligon and his more about his life. So the text that was chosen for this art piece was by James Baldwin. James Baldwin, his essay of 1953 is the text that Glenn Legend took for inspiration. So James Baldwin is a gay black man. He took a trip to Switzerland, and that's when he wrote this essay of 1953. It was based on that experience. He is the first black man that most of the Swiss people in Switzerland and the hamlet that he stayed in experienced. Those people, James wrote that he was the first and maybe only black person they've ever encountered. When the children saw him, they actually grabbed his hair and were just in such awe of him. They even walked away, calling him a racial slur that they knew to be the only way to describe him. So he experienced a lot of just really interesting things, and this really stuck out to Glenn Legend, and that's why he chose this piece. When he read it, he had very similar experiences, and he was inspired by the weight and gravity of the essay, and he felt like he wanted to reflect that in his own way, in his own material, and in a formal choice. So a little background on Glenn Legend. He grew up in the Bronx, in a very poor neighborhood. The neighborhood where he grew up, there was only one house that was fully intact, and that was a police department. So he grew up with a lot of poverty. He would go to school in Manhattan. So even though he lived in the Bronx, his elementary school, he'd have to travel to Manhattan. So he grew up passing all of the different slums and seeing the different ways people lived and how it was different from how he grew up. He ended up going to college at Wesleyan University. One of the teachers described him, elementary school teachers described him as, Glenn has a good knowledge of slavery and black history, but finds standard social studies uninteresting, and he's yet to develop no social consciousness. He tends to be politically apathetic about being black, which is a shame. So this really stuck out to Glenn, and he actually ended up making a artwork based off of this. He had a text that I couldn't actually find online, but there is sources saying that it was one of his first art pieces, and it really defined who he was, that he was, and through his artwork, as we'll find out later, he is a very socially conscious person. So this to him, I think, really stuck out, that he really wanted to push that boundary and prove that teacher wrong, which I think a lot of people want to do when they are told they are something they don't believe they are. So his largest collection of work is at the Whitney Museum of Art. He's actually had a long-standing relationship with the Whitney Museum. He has had his art in those museums for 25 years. Glenn Ligon is a 59-year-old man. He graduated from an independent study group on top of his bachelor's at Wesleyan from the Whitney Museum of Art as well. So he definitely had a very close and tight-knit relationship with this museum. He is an African-American man, and he identifies as gay. So here are two more pieces of his artwork. So his artwork here on the left is called Notes on the Margin of a Black Book. Underneath the quotes, underneath some of the pictures and above the other pictures, there's quotes of good and bad, but about black men. And you cannot tell by these pictures, but they are very risque. A lot of very intimate parts are shown in these photos, and it hangs about 90 artwork. There's 90 pieces of art in this display, and it really spoke to him of what he really wanted. He embraced the racism that happens, but he also wants to show the beauty in what people misunderstand at first sight. So it is supposed to be a very thought-provoking piece or collection. The photo to the left is his two collections. So it's just a screen print text. I am a man. And then on the other piece is more handwritten notes. Those notes just challenge all of the things that he would hear about himself. So as a black man, he felt like men in general have had to come a very long, black men in general had to come a very long way to be identified as a man and as a person. And a lot of times he felt like people were not respecting of that, and he wanted to just make that blanket statement, I am a man. And he didn't feel like he should have to justify that, but that is something that I think through his experiences he wanted to create a piece of. So his artwork is contemporary, or is listed under contemporary art. Contemporary art is nicknamed the art of today. So there's pop art, as in Andy Warhol. So the pieces of the Campbell soup and things of that nature would be classified under pop art. Conceptualism is a fight for art that it is not a commodity. So artists like Awiwi would fit into that category. Photorealism are paintings that are the most realistic versions of, wine bottles, or but they're meant to look like a picture of them, but they are paintings. So artists like Chuck Close would be a hyper-realistic photo of a painting, would be classified under that. And then street art is another category underneath contemporary art. So contemporary art is about activism. Murals that go on sides of buildings, graffiti can all be listed under street art, and Banksy would be a more popular artist that people would refer to for street art. For Glenn Ligon, he's a mix of a lot of different things. For his contemporary art, he is more activism. It's text-based, so a lot of those stenciled letters and phrases that are powerful to him. Some of them are layered in the coal dust, some of them are not. It's about authority, history, and identity. So a lot of things that he identifies with himself and then challenges himself to make sure that or challenges the identity people put on him. So the time period that this was made was in 1998. This painting was done during a time where people were fighting for who they are and what they stand for. And this art piece in general it came around at the end of the 90s. So a lot of the civil rights movements have already happened. However, Glenn Legend actually went to school with Andrew Goodman, who was slain through activism or through the civil rights movement. And he went to that same school as him. So he grew up with a lot of activism, a lot of civil rights fights. It was also an era where sexuality wasn't openly accepted or discussed. LGBTQ did not have full rights. We are still living in a time where just recently they were given rights to marry and things like that. So these are all things that he identified with himself, of being a black man, of being a gay black man. So for him, a lot of his art is just an expression of that, and you can see that in his paintings. These are two more pieces of work for him. These are actually the civil rights movement. So this is this picture on the left is actually it's called Hands. It's a silk screen, and it's actually 3 different pieces that are put into one. Something that I learned about this painting or the silk screen was that black women were encouraged to take the day off of work, but not to actually come to the movements. So in this one in general, he made sure to photograph and put a section that only had men in it. So that was really important to him to really strongly put out little facts and little tidbits that I think he really likes to get people wondering. It's a great piece on its own, and he often refers to his paintings as standalone. You can take in a lot and appreciate the artwork on their own. However, when you go to do the background on them, they do get more interesting, and you can take more away from the paintings. And when you do know the background, seeing the paintings themselves have a lot more depth. So the next painting, the painting on the right, is called The Study of Negro Sunshine. So it's just over and over again repeated, just the phrase Negro Sunshine. And you can see at the bottom the coal dust is heavier, where on the top it's a lot lighter. So this is again the same techniques that he used in the artwork that that I focused on, Strangers in the Village, number 13. But this one obviously has a much lighter background so that the words pop out more. He has another painting that says, I feel blackest when I am standing next to a pure white wall. And I think he tries to play a lot with that, of having it completely be hidden and the words almost indistinguishable, versus the white background and having those words pop up behind it. So this is actually a photo of Glenn Legend. He is still alive today and still creating artwork. For me, I really chose this piece because immediately seeing the piece, it's just a very beautiful piece of artwork, as you can see it again. And seeing it, it was one of those things where I had to go up close to it. I walked up further back from it. I looked at it from all the different angles, as you can see in the picture. It's just a very powerful piece without knowing any of the background behind it. Looking at the background behind it and finding out the artist and all of the different emotions that he felt through this piece, it was just really cool to incorporate that history behind it. So for me, I really enjoyed this piece, and once I dug further on the history, looking back, it's just a really powerful piece to me. I do believe that his paintings and his artwork are they speak to the issues that he feels still need to be addressed. There's still rights that Black people do not have, freedoms that they are not automatically given. So it's really cool to see all of it in action. And it was really moving to see it when I walked up to it. So I think a lot of his work runs in a similar fashion.